Time for part two of our chat with star broadcaster Matt Hill. He's called 8 Melbourne Cups. He's become an outstanding AFL broadcaster, and he's been to 7 Olympic Games in winter and summer Olympics in total. One of the best broadcasters in Australia at the moment. And when he retires, which is many, many years away, he might become one of the greatest of all time. Here's part two. I hope you enjoy it. You've become an outstanding AFL commentator in a short space of time. And what I mean by that was obviously always there. You probably needed an opportunity. You're now part of Fox. You're obviously part of SEN. How challenging is it to go from horse racing one day to AFL footy the next?
Well, the actual disciplines are different, so that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. The only problem I probably would come across is on a football field to not go into race caller mode. What I say by that is, it becomes very fast, so you have to remember to sort of wind it back a bit. But I find that going from one, for me personally, it works for me. It might not work for other people, but I go from one bubble to the next. So if I was in the racing bubble for 365 days a year, it would wear me down eventually. So if I'm calling football, I'm happier at the races and vice versa. So I love going from one to the other. And with football, I'll be doing more of it next year, particularly for television. It's going to be busier. And I actually really enjoy the difference between the preparation for football and the preparation for racing. The preparation for football is completely different. It's about narrative. It's about the style of play. And fundamentally, my job in a TV sense is just to tell the person listening and viewing who's got it and fitting in with other people. I've got 3 or 4 others that are with me, got a co-commentator, got experts, whereas in a race call, I don't. I'm there, as I say, on an island on my own. So it's a completely different discipline, and I enjoy that because I feel with football, regardless if it's TV or radio, you're sort of a group, a part of a sort of a project that's trying to achieve something, and you can walk out as a collective at the end of the day pretty satisfied that you got it right. And whereas race calling, as I say, I leave the race course like every other workout on my Pat Malone, put the bag in the boot of the car, and off I go. And it's my job and my job only. So I enjoy the fact that I get to work with people, and let's be honest, it's the best game on earth.
Oh, absolutely is. Can you over prepare when you're doing a sporting event?
Yes. Well, no, actually, there's a 2-tiered answer to that question. You can over prepare, which is fine, but you don't have to say everything you've prepared for on air.
Correct.
You can allow it to just, hit the cutting room floor, as they say. And I don't think a lot of things, even if they are on the cutting room floor, you might use them at some other point. So, no, I don't think you can ever over-prepare, but I think you can, and we've all been victim of it, is using things just for the sake of showing that we have prepared, if that makes sense. And I think, as I say, it all comes back down to the philosophy of what you're doing, what you're trying to achieve, what story you're trying to tell, and what does the punter, and I say punter as in the viewer, listener, etc., what do they really care about, and what do they take in? And that's what because you're fundamentally, it doesn't matter if you're calling local football or if you're calling AFL grand finals or you're calling Olympics or calling the local Little League running race, you're still broadcasting to a certain amount of people that need to be told certain things. And at the end of the day, if Richmond haven't won a final for 1,234 days, well, it's a fantastic stat, but it ain't relevant.
Fantastic. You don't think it's relevant?
Well, it's not relevant in that you can easily say they haven't won a premiership, haven't won a final for 4 years. You don't have to give it the days. There's certain things that you just don't have to say.
So do you think we're a bit too stats driven in AFL footy in particular at times?
It depends on it. I think probably yes, actually. And the only reason why I say that is because general John Smith, who's the local mechanic who goes to watch Collingwood play on a Friday night, how many statistics does he care about? At the end of the day, I think the statistics are a little bit of a way of people trying to prove they know something more than anybody else. And it amazes me, even grand final time, when Sydney was playing Brisbane and the experts had a week to just status full of everything. We had every stat, everything written in black and white in the Herald Sun. We had every stat on radio. And when we got to the game on Saturday, I said to people, "Who are these experts? Who's going to win it?" They went, "We don't know. We have no idea." Most of them picked Sydney. So, I think we can overdo it at the end of the day. I think we can overanalyze, and it keeps radio going for the week. It keeps TV shows going. But, yeah, I think we do overanalyze a lot of stuff.
I think if you're a Collingwood supporter, and I've got a lot of mates who are Collingwood supporters, and, I love you all. I think they're only right about two stats: Collingwood winning and the free kick count. And if Collingwood are not in front, they've got a week to whinge about it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And don't worry, stats to a certain extent are important. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
But, I think we can overplay it. And I think the problem is with football is there are parts of the game where there's a real lull. And I think that's when you feel there's there might be an opportunity to throw in a stat. And really, stats are great. They've just got to be relevant. That's the key.
You're a Western Bulldogs supporter, but you're unlike me. People, even if they didn't know I was a Western Bulldogs supporter, knew I was a Western Bulldogs supporter, sadly, when I called Matt, because I'm glass 3/4 empty, and you know me well enough to know that I've always been a bit negative about our beloved doggies. You tend to keep that pretty quiet. You just call it the way you see it, no matter who plays.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, I do follow the Bulldogs to a certain extent, but I find that through football season now that I'm taking it all in about every team. I just like listening about what every team's up to. So even though the Bulldogs were my team when I was young, I was an absolute ferocious Bulldog. In fact, what have I got here? I've got an Eastern Wood bobblehead. There we go. That's in the office. I've got a mug here. It's all happening.
It is.
But I find that even calling the Dogs, I enjoy calling the Bulldogs, but I also think that, again, you've got to call appropriately. So I think people know I barrack for the Bulldogs, and that's fine. It's everyone. I think it'd be like you're going to the mechanic, but they weren't interested in cars. I mean, you've got to have if you're interested in football, you would have supported somebody in your time. So, but I get a great kick out of just calling good football. And I haven't quite worked it out yet which one's more exhilarating, calling a player running into goal 40 metres out in front of 80,000 or a horse running away in a Melbourne Cup in front of 80,000. I haven't quite worked that out yet.
Even though you've caught a lot more horse racing. That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I think, well, as I say, I mean, I'm a Melburnian through and through, and spent all my misspent youth watching football, watching the doggies at the Whitten Oval, and was obsessed with it on TV. So, it's, as I say, it's once you've been brought up with it and it's in your DNA, it's the best thing in the world to go to the MCG during footy season.
Just a couple of basic questions, Matt. And Matt Hill is my guest here. He's getting ready for the Melbourne Cup number 9. He's been to 7 Olympic Games. The Winter Olympics, you did some alpine skiing. I think you did some speed skating. What was that experience like? Speed skating, I suppose, is a touch of the horse racing in it, isn't it?
No, I love the Winter Olympics. And people in Australia don't realise is that half the world, the Winter Olympics are bigger than the Summer Olympics. In fact, in America, it's 50-50. You go to places, Scandinavia, obviously, the Winter Olympics mean everything to them, and, the Summer Olympics not so much. So the Winter Olympics are a big deal. And I think as a spectacle, they're one of the great sports spectacles of the world. They're fantastic. Alpine skiing's great. it's really the blue ribbon. It's a little bit like the 100 final. So I enjoyed doing that with a guy called John O'Brower at the Beijing Winter Olympics. He was a very an ex alpine skier, and rightly admitted that to be an alpine skier you've got to have a little bit of a screw loose upstairs, and I think he certainly admitted that. And the speed skating, I was with the one and only Stephen Bradbury.
Yes.
And we did the Beijing Winter Olympics off tube for Channel 7, but I had been to a Winter Olympics. I called the speed skating in Sochi at Sochi, and the South Korean Victor Ahn won everything there, and he actually was representing Russia in quite a controversial switch of countries, and he became Russia's first gold medalist in speed skating. So that was huge. I do really enjoy the Winter Olympics. The one sport I haven't called that I'd like to have a go at Winter Olympics, you might laugh, that I do have a fascination for it because I think they're extraordinary, is the luge. I can't believe they do what they do. I'd like to have a go at that.
Hurling's the one for me, even though I don't understand it. It's like you're sweeping the floor. It's the most fascinating sport I have ever seen, Matt. Ever seen.
Well, I did call a bit of the curling in Sochi. Of us had to. So curling makes up a lot of the content now for the Winter Olympics because there's so much of it. And the thing about curling again is that it's a tricky one to call. Because you have to know a lot about it, and there's only a small group of people, but they love it to death. They never bag curling to them because they absolutely love it. But you're right; it is chess on ice. It really is, and it's one of those sports I reckon that people get right into, and then by the end of the 2 weeks, they're real experts.
Now you've done it off tube. You've been to the live venue. How difficult is it? And I've called football off the TV. I've obviously done most of my Olympic sports at my 3 Olympic Games. In fact, all of my Olympic sports that I've called off tube. How more difficult and challenging to you is calling off tube compared to actually being at the venue?
Depends what sport it is. So I would say that football's an interesting one. I prefer to be at the venue. Yeah. For AFL football, but it's not the end of the world if you're not there. For the commentator, I think the special comments guys would have something to say about that. They prefer to be there. Athletics, you have to be there to see them before the races start. Same with horse racing. Tennis, I don't think you'd have to be because you can see the court, you can see the two players. I think it's a lot of it's about just sight and about what you need pre and post a commentary. So I think being there is ideal, but for some sports it's not that necessary. So put it this way, if I was calling the final of the Madrid Open of tennis, I wouldn't be that fussed if I was in Melbourne or Madrid. But some other sports, you'd want to be there.
COVID for a while's changed the way we call, obviously with TV networks and radio football networks. They saw that it was a cost-cutting exercise. We're starting to come out of that, but can you see eventually with the Olympic Games that everything will come off tube? We saw certainly in 2021 that was the case, obviously because COVID was still a big part of the rest of the world. It was sort of starting to be reduced in Australia. It changed a little bit with Channel 9. They sent more people over, didn't they, for Paris?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, as I say, it sort of depends on what sport. But I think that we've got to a stage where the listener doesn't really care.
No.
They get the right comment. Whereas I reckon 10 years ago they did care. They would have felt a bit slighted. So like anything, the world's changed. And the other thing is that the next generation, so I'm 43 now, I mean, a 20-year-old coming through calling off tube might not know anything different. So they just take it for that. The youngsters are quite happy to do it that way. So, as I say, depends on what sport it is. I'm not, au fait with calling every single sport, because I haven't called every single sport. I've never called cricket and don't really have a interest to do so. But, things like tennis I don't think is necessary. AFL is an interesting one because I have called games off tube and found it to be okay, but I still would prefer to be at the ground.
I know the experts would prefer to be at the ground because they need to see the running patterns. They need to see what's happening behind the player, whatever. It'd be very hard for them. It's not so hard for us because, again, it's all about calling what you see. You talked about the cricket. No interest in the cricket?
Yeah, I like cricket. Cricket. So, I have no absolute sort of fascination with, again, statistics or the background stuff of it. And I think if you're going to call cricket, it's a very nuanced sport. So you have to fill the gaps, and that's not for me. As I say, I enjoy a day out at the cricket, but it's just not my thing. The motorsport would be the one I haven't called that I would like to call. I do like that. I like the excitement of motorsport, and golf. I really like golf. But no, as I say, you can't be everything to everyone, and I don't want to be everything to everyone. Racing and footy were my two loves, and that's the way I'm going to keep it.
Now, very early in your career, you got the opportunity to do the Olympic Games. That was a great highlight for you, wasn't it?
Yeah, so my first Olympic Games were a bit dodgy. I went to Beijing in 2008 and got very ill.
You did, yes.
Almost didn't come back alive. But yeah, I've been lucky in that the Olympics have been something that I've always wanted to do, and as you say, I've been to worked on 7 of them now, winter and summer. So they are great fun, and they're a great test, I think, for a broadcaster because you are thrown things that you don't usually do. And there's multiple reasons for that, but also the fact that, there's even guys in England who would love to be full-time athletics callers, but there's no such thing as full-time athletics. Go and call snooker or something in the meantime to fill their year. So as a result, they're always filling sports with commentators such as Mark Taylor doing diving, and guys like Dave Colbert doing the rafting, and myself rowing because, and I don't call rowing any other time bar for Olympic Games. So, that's just the nature of the beast. But no, the Olympics are great. I'd be very interested if we had this conversation in 20 years' time where the Olympics are going to be at. We touched on it before. I think they'll be different. They'll still be the Olympics. They'll still be big, but they'll certainly be different. I wonder what sports could get in. I could even envisage that e-games will be a big part of it. And I know it's hard.
I hope not, but I think I agree with you. Yes.
Yeah, they'll be there. I'd actually have a bet on it that I reckon that the e-games will be there. So that they'll be changed. The world will change again, and technology will be interesting when it comes to the Olympics in 20 years' time. What technology we'll have. And does that mean that, I know Wimbledon have tried AI commentators? Maybe all of us will be out of a job by then. You just don't know. So you just got to lap it up while we can.
Now, Matt, you spoke about being ill. I hope you don't mind me bringing up the war. How confronting was that experience for you? I know it was 16 years ago now.
Yeah, it was 16 years ago, wasn't it? No, well, I think it was probably harder for the people in my family to watch it than me because I was in an induced coma eventually. So I got sick. I was calling the rowing in Beijing and got ill. Eventually, a thing called melioidosis, which was through dust, and a respiratory sort of illness. And so I was air-vac'd out of China to Hong Kong, and a professor basically saved my life over there with antibiotics, etc. So, so it was a bit of a dramatic first Olympic Games, that's for sure. But, it just, look, the experience was bad, obviously, but you walk away from it with a lot of lessons that we're not here for a long time, and putting the bins out on a Thursday night's not that dramatic, not that important, So from a 27-year-old who was fighting fit, didn't have an ailment to go over and get something, as sort of a bit of a lesson that you just don't take life for granted.
So that was the outlook that changed for you. You don't take it for granted. You try and make every post a winner.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And as I say, I mean, we all do it. We all sit around and can moan and whinge about, things that are in reality not that important, and this sounds very sort of profound, but we all do it. We all sit and worry about what am I doing tomorrow? Why do I have to do this? Gee, I forgot to put the bins out, etc., etc. But when it comes to the crunch, it doesn't mean much at all. So, and the one thing about it, for some reason, it made me, probably because I didn't experience the Olympics in full, in some funny way, it made me want to do 20 Olympics instead of, I might have hung up the binoculars after 4 or 5 of them, but I want to do heaps of them now. So, it made me more determined, if anything.
Young people who want to get into the industry, and I'm sure have spoken to you, and you've been on with me when I've been teaching at Swinburne, and I thank you very much for that. And the audience was captivated by you. Are they in too much of a hurry nowadays to get to the top straight away, well before they're ready?
They are, but that's not just sports commentators. That's just life, unfortunately, or fortunately. We live in a world where youngsters are taught to be, and don't worry, this is not my area of expertise, but what I've taken from afar is that they're taught to be aspirational in an unhealthy way, that they can do everything, and unfortunately, a lot of the jobs they're trying to go for, Rome wasn't built in a day. I can guarantee it. The job of being the main race caller in Melbourne wasn't built in a day. It took a lot of hard yards, and the thing is, I'm grateful for that, and I think the person who eventually replaces me will have done the hard yards as well. But in a sense, yes, they are, because they're told I don't know if parenting's changed over the last 10, 15 years. It's just a different generation. They want everything now. The one thing I can only go back to my generation, and I remember I was taught respect your elders. I used to refer to Greg Miles as Mr. Miles and Brian Martin as Mr. Martin. When I was 15, 16, no one will come up to me and call me Mr. Hill now.
Would you like them to first time around, and then you say, call me Matt?
But I don't like, if a 16-year-old comes up to me and calls me mate. I mean, that's a bit, I think there's still got to be an element of respect there. But I mean, without sounding like an old man, I think, the generations have changed, and there will be kids that come along and want everything now, but that's not just sports commentators. That's everything. It's just the world we live in.
I know Greg pretty well. Worked with him at the ABC in my early days. Lovely man, and we attend a lot of reunions now at the Clark Hansons and Peter Booth's Homes of the World, and it's fantastic. And he's a terrific guy. What's he mean to you, Matt?
Oh, well, Greg Miles. I met Greg when I was 15, and from that point on, I always say when I was a youngster, instead of having supermodels and footballers on my wall, I had Greg Miles and Bruce McAvaney. They were the two people I just adored, and Greg's like a father. He's like Greg was a great race caller, but also Greg was a great teacher.
Yes.
Not deliberately being a teacher, but just watching him go through what he did. And it might have been something so small, like when for instance, he'd call a race, and if he was to go and leave the broadcast box for some reason, he'd put his jacket back on. Little small things like that I observed him doing, that would show what a professional does, and he was a magnificent race caller with the most fantastic mellifluous voice that would just boom through a PA system like no one else. He was absolutely fantastic and so accurate. And his style would always adapt to who he was calling for. When he was with Sky Racing, it was a very sort of commercial type call. He went back to radio, and it was a very in-depth call. I thought he was just the ultimate professional. So I learned so much off him, but also a way from the racetrack. He's a great, as you say, great personality, great to spend company with, and just a genuinely good person. And you've got to have. I think if you're going to make it in life, you have to have mentors and idols are two separate things, but you've got to have both. And he was a great idol to look up to. Great role model.
Same with Bruce, or different relationship?
No, very similar relationship. It's one of my I find a great achievement to have that sort of mutual respect with someone like Bruce, who's such a great icon of our great industry. But the thing is, he loves racing, and that's the great thing about Bruce. We could sit and talk for hours about horses, and we have done previously. But he's another one that, like you and like myself, love the art of it and study the art of it. And wouldn't I don't think Bruce, and I've never done it and you've never done it, to actually be famous. It's I think you talk about the young kids before. I think they think it's a way they can become famous, and that's never been the reason for me doing it. I just adore the art form of it, and Bruce is exactly the same. So yeah, it's lovely to have those influences. Every art form needs influences, and I'm lucky that I've got some great people I can, and you get to a certain level where you want advice, and they're the people you go to.
Before I let you go, and Matt Hill's been my guest on Dashing Dan's Sporting Adventures. Great to have you with us. Got a very busy month coming up with the Melbourne Cup, one of the great broadcasters in the history of broadcasting in this country, and he's only just touched the surface. I think by the time he retires, he could be the greatest. I think he might be the greatest we've ever seen, but I won't put too much pressure on you, Matthew. Now, if Matt Hill wasn't broadcasting sport, what would he be doing?
Oh, good question. I reckon it'd be two things.
Yeah.
I reckon I would have been I would have worked at Flight Centre.
Flight Centre?
Yeah, as as a travel agent.
Really?
I love travel.
Right.
Or I would have, back in the broadcasting sort of mode, I would have been a foreign correspondent.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by foreign correspondents, like the Christiane Amanpour and Lise Doucette and all of the BBC and NBC correspondents that travel the globe and hunting war out and things like that. I don't know if I'd go to war, maybe. How close they get to war, I'm not sure. But I think I would. There would be a part of me that finds that quite exhilarating, and I love travel. So maybe it would have been to do with planes, possibly.
So you've obviously going to take a break in December, because then the tennis comes up and the footies are not far away after that. So have you got a trip planned, and where's the favourite place you've been to so far? And also, where's the place you haven't been to that you really want to go to outside Australia?
So great question. So I am going away in December. December's my little break, but I am actually going to somewhere that I've always wanted to go, that's Buenos Aires in Argentina. I have 3 racetracks in Buenos Aires, so I'll be well and truly there. So I'm going to that one. The one place I do love, you touched on it before, is London.
Yeah.
Absolute beauty. And I've probably been to London through racing a lot of the times. I've probably been to London about 25 times, I think, now, through Royal Ascot and Grand Nationals and things. So love the place, have a lot of friends there now. So any excuse I get on a plane to London. It's just a long way away, unfortunately. But love the place. And the other, probably the one other place the one place that was my favourite trip, actually, I went to Seoul.
Wow.
For a week in South Korea, and I thought that was fabulous. Really enjoyed Seoul. Where would I go? The one place I would like to go, but it's had a few problems the last 6-7 months, is New Caledonia.
Yeah.
Holiday destination. So, and we touched on another one, St. Lucia.
Yes.
The races in St. Lucia. So there's a few to do.
Of course there is. I mean, you're only young, so you can do all that. A couple of quick ones before we go. Favourite race course to call,
Flemington,
and least favourite, and why?
Flemington's the best. Hard. It's not an easy track to call at, but it's just the track of dreams, really. It's the best racetrack in the world. It's a beauty. Hardest to call at?
Yeah, hardest is a better word. Yeah.
Hardest to call at. It'd be a bush track. A lot of the callers would say New South Wales Muswellbrook's the hardest, but a lot of the country tracks are tough because you're out in the broadcast boxes aren't very comfortable. You might not be near the line. You might be too low. I'm very lucky nowadays. I get to go to tracks that we're pretty comfortable at. The hardest probably in Victoria for me would be Ballarat, and It's not the position we're in or anything. It's just that it's a large racetrack. So you get a lot of horses that can get caught wide there and you don't see them. And the mounting yard's obscured, so you don't get a good look at them as they go to the gates. And because Ballarat's such a great track, you have big fields there. So I'd have a day of 10 races and 18 runners in every race. So it's always a testing day to work.
Because I think people love going there, don't they? It's got a great name, isn't it? Dowling Forest. And when it's just off the beaten track a bit too, isn't it?
Yeah. Funny, it's very English, beautiful trees and things. But that's why it's a great racetrack. It's massive, a mile and a half, even more around. But for the race caller, it can be challenging.
And are you ever been able to work out why? And they would say we go the wrong way in Victoria. Why they go the other way around in New South Wales, Matt?
Yeah,
I'm intrigued by that.
As I said to you, Melbourne and Sydney, the jealousy's gone back a long, long time. Sydney went one way, Melbourne went, we'll go the other. That's as simple as that. That's the explanation.
Is it? If you called in Sydney, and if you have called in Sydney, did it take you a while to get used to the fact that they're going the other way around?
No, it's like, the jockeys, you can ask the jockeys that. They probably find it's a little bit interesting because the horses can change legs. But for a race caller, there's no difference at all. No difference at all. I loved calling in Sydney. The one race I loved doing was the Golden Slipper. I loved the Golden Slipper. 1,200-metre race, 2-year-olds all pent up, raring to go. It's very Sydney, the Golden Slipper, and I loved calling that. And they're big handicaps, the Doncaster and the Epsom, big fields. Randwick's are testing 1,600. They always said you need a 2,000-metre horse to win at a mile in Sydney. So I loved calling those races. We've got a very strong... We've got racing's very strong in Australia, and Brisbane racing's very good. Adelaide and Perth are still keeping up with the Joneses. So we've got a really good game here.
Favourite Melbourne Cup so far? As I say, you're about to do your 9th, and we wish you all the best with that. And best horse you've seen so far that you've called?
Vow and Declare's Melbourne Cup was my favourite. It was a great race. Probably the most frenetic Melbourne Cup finish we've ever seen. And best horse I've called, no doubt, Winks. There would never be another Winks. 4 Cox Plates. Who would have thought it? Wow. So that's the great thing about racing, though. Just when we think we've seen the best, who knows what we'll see in the next decade? You just never know. And
you spoke before about the rivalry between Sydney and Melbourne. Probably the most famous racing figure in Sydney is a wonderful lady called Gay Waterhouse. Where does she spend most of her time while Everest is on in Sydney, in Melbourne?
Yeah, she loves our racing. She really loves it. And she's a traditionalist, and she's just a great thing for our sport. The problem is, I think when Bart Cummings died, a little bit of the Melbourne Cup died when Bart died, and Gay's not going to go forever. But boy, she's given it a good crack. She travels the world. She's a pocket rocket. She's had a remarkable career, and boy, she can train a horse.
And I will say this: we know her husband got a hard time. Look, and he did do the wrong thing at the time with the media, but she hasn't backed away from talking to the media, even after knew how busy she was after she won that big race, of course, in Melbourne on the week, in Sydney it was on the weekend, of course, and Jason Richardson found her and she gave him a grab for a couple of minutes. I mean, she loves the media and she's so good at it.
So she's always a part of the racing launches. She's always involved with those. She's very energetic, and she's an amazing woman. Gets up at 2:30 every day with a swagger, and it works so well with her younger co-trainer now, Adrian Bott, and that's the direction racing's going in. We've now got training partnerships of 3 trainers now. That's fair enough. And she's a great thing for the theatre of the sport. But she's a bit like Bart Cummings. Even when she's got a roughie or an outsider in a race, you can never discount her.
No. And she'll tell you too, I've got one for you, or she'll give you advice about everything. You're not looking good today, Dan or Matt or whatever. I don't like that tie, dear. Change this, change that. has advice whether you want it or not, and you just take it because it's gay, and that's why I love her. Matt, we love you. Thanks so much for joining us and giving us so much time. I know you got a lot on your plate. We look forward to what's going to be a very, very busy month for you. You will call as brilliantly as you always do. It's always a pleasure chatting to you, and all the best. And thanks for joining us on Dashing Down Sporting Adventures.
No, absolute pleasure, Dan. Always good to talk to you, and look forward to hearing more of your adventures.
Good on you, mate. Thanks so much.
Terrific.